So when using Tailwind, if you look at the docs, on the plugin section over here, what we can do is we can extend Tailwind with reusable third-party plugins. So in our case, what happens is plugins let you register new styles for Tailwind to inject to the user style sheet using JavaScript instead of CSS. So there's many different plugins in here, but the official ones are the typography, forms, aspect ratio, and container queries. So let's go ahead and look at some official ones, and this is how you would inject them. And we are using a couple in this project, so we'll go through the forms one, which is the one we're going to implement. So if we look at the excerpt here, it says the form plugin adds an opinionated form reset layer that makes it easier to style form elements with utility classes. So what I want to do is open this in a new tab. And now you've got this Git repo here, which tells you how to install it. But essentially, all of the form elements you use will have some sort of default styles that are easily overridden with utilities. Currently, we have basic utility-friendly form styles for the following form element types. So essentially, it adds base styles in for us, and then we can override them as well. So let's go ahead and install this plugin. So if we copy this and go into our project, and what we need to do is do yarn add and paste it in as a dev dependency, Tailwind CSS forms. And then all we need to do is, if we go into our Tailwind config.js over here, and then we have plugins as an array. And what we want to implement is the Tailwind CSS/forms. So again, we implement that. So now let's save this. And if we go in here, all we need to do now is use our Tailwind forms. So let's go ahead and do that and create our form. So let's close everything off that we don't need. So we're back into the login component in here. So now what I want to do is, under the logo section, I want to create a new component in our module called login form. And again, what we need to do is go into the modules of login and create a new file called loginform.tsx and reusable. And this is where we are going to have our forms. So let's first of all import this in. And now let's see what we need to do in our login form. So we have an email address input, we have a password input, and we have the sign in button here. And then we also have the forgot password link, which we will also add as well. So in our form, we'll use the HTML form tag here, like so. And then in the form, we want 2 inputs, and we also want a button. So what we can do is essentially create a reusable input component and then pass in the relevant props in there. So what I'm going to do is, in our components folder now, I'm going to create a new folder in here. So this is the input folder. So in here, we're going to create an index.tsx, and we're just going to create an input. So it's going to be reusable. This is going to be named the input. And this will take in some props that we will look at later on. But for now, this is going to be an input. Essentially what we want is a label and then the input. So let's go ahead and create a label. And then this label is going to be the email. Let's do the email label for now. And this is an email address. And then underneath here, we're going to have an input. This is going to be of type email. And let's just save that for now. What I also want to do is render this input into my component just so we can see it. And then now let's just save everything. And in our browser, it's not being rendered. So let's just check why that is the case. So in our login here, we have the login form, which is correct. If we go into it, we have the form, which is rendering the input. And then the input is returning the div with the email address and the type of email. So what we now need to do is run the actual app. So yarn dev, because we installed the Tailwind Forms plugin. So now it will refresh, and now you can see our label is showing, but the input isn't. So what we now need to do is style them both. So first off, let's style the label. So this will be a class name of block. So this is display of block. The text is going to be small. So we're using the text SM class. The font is going to be medium, which is essentially if we hover over it, the font weight is medium of 500. We're going to have a leading of 6, which again is the line height. And then this text is going to be gray of 900. We props to the input, so we're going to give it an ID equal to the email as well. We're going to make this required, so this input will be required. The type we've already done, and now what we need to do is the class name. So let's style this input. So because it's a reusable component, all we need to do is pass in the props, and the style is already created, and we are doing that now. So this will be a block style again. We're going to have a width of full within its parent. It's going to be rounded -MD. So if we hover over this essentially is a border radius, and it gives the border radius value here. The border of 0, which means that there's no border width. It's just rounding out the input itself. We're going to give it a padding all over of 1.5. So now you can, if you hover over 1.5, it gives it a half value as well. So you don't have to do padding of 1, 2, 3, and so on. We're going to give it a shadow of small. So if you hover over shadow, you can see it applies all of these styles here. So it saves you all of the time and effort of Googling what styles you want to add for a shadow in here. So that's another handy feature of Tailwind because of its pre-defined classes. We're going to give it a ring 1 and a ring inset. And I explain what these are. So a ring 1 is all of these styles over here. So saves you implementing that. And then a ring inset gives it the style of inset. Now what we want to do is also color in the ring. So the ring color is going to be ring gray of 300. So now let's see what that does to the styles. So now you can see here we have a ring color, and this is width of full as well. And then we have the gray ring color all around with a slight little shadow. Now what we want to do is, with an input element, we have placeholders in there. So let's give it a placeholder for now of enter your email address like so. And we can style the placeholder itself. So let's go ahead and style the placeholder. And the way you can do that is if you just type in placeholder, like we did with the hover before. And then when we focus, we want the ring to be larger. So at the minute, the ring is 1. But what we can do when we focus it is give it a ring of 2. And we can also give the ring a color. So focus of ring -red of 500. So the theme or the color scheme of this app is going to be red for our Bowlers Boutique. So that's how you would add your focus style. I'm going to delete that because what happens is Tailwind Forms implements its own classes. So if we go into here and click into it, you can see here it adds its own classes, and it's got its own little padding as well. So we'll just use the plugins classes for this for now. And if we type, you can see here that is working correctly. Now, what I want to do is on small screens, we haven't looked at this. So with breakpoints in Tailwind, you can have multiple breakpoints. So you could do the breakpoints that you normally have using media queries, but with Tailwind, it has predefined breakpoints already. So anything from a small size going up, what I want to do is give the text as small. So now if I save, you should have spaces as well in here. So let's save that. So that is the input complete. What I want to do is add a margin top in here of 2, just to space out the label and the input. So now you can see that's a little spaced out. So that's fine. So now that we've created the reusable input component and we've got the styles, we don't need to restyle it all the time. It will have a consistent styling across whenever we use the input component. So all we now need to do is pass in props. So the props that I want to pass in, first one is going to be the name of the input. So this will be reusable, and it will take in a name like that. And then also a label, which essentially is the label here. So we want to pass in the label, and in our case, because we are using React, we aren't using any external form libraries. We want to pass in the piece of state that holds the value and the on change for the input itself, so we can extract the value from the input itself. So that is what we need. We're not going to be working with functionality. We're just focusing on the styling or the Tailwind itself. So now what I want to do is be able to take in the input props, which is the label as a string and the name as a string. So let's pass this in as an argument in here to satisfy TypeScript. So now that is the login form created. What we now need to do is in our login form, we need to pass in the relevant props. So in here, now if we hover over it, it says it's missing the label and the name. So let's go ahead and do that. So the label in our case is going to be the email address. And then the name is going to be the email. And I just want to repeat that one more time, but in the next one is going to be the password, and then this is going to be password. So let's go ahead and check that out. So the email and the password is getting shown on here. This placeholder we can remove in our input component. So let's remove that, or you could pass in the name in here, but I'm just going to remove it for this one. So let's save that now. So now you have the email address and the password. As you can see, Tailwind Forms has been implemented because it adds the focus outline over there and the small little padding that we have here on the left. And it will also add it on the right as well. So now if I go back into the login form, we have the two inputs here. Now we just need the forgot password link, which is over here. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is an A tag, and the href is going to be blank for now. I'll just put a hashtag in for now, and then this is just going to say forgot password. And what we need to do is style this. So give it a class name of text sm, leading of 6, font of semi-bold. It's going to be red text, so text red of 600, and then when we hover over it, it's going to be text red of 500. So let's go ahead and check that out. So now what we need to do is move this over to the right. So that's quite simple. All we do is at the beginning here, we give it flex, and then we want to give it justify content of end. So it will be justify dash end, like so. So now if I save, you can see it's moved to the right. So that is this section complete. What I want to do is this form here, I'm going to give it some styling because it needs spacing out a little bit. So class name on the form, it's going to be flex and then flex direction of column. So that's flex col. We will now want to give it a gap of 4. So that separates each individual item out. And I also want to give it a margin top of 10. So now if I save this, that looks a little better. The last thing we need is the button. So let's go ahead and create a reusable button component. And again, this could be extracted into its own component, but because it's not reusable across the app, we can just leave it as it is up here. At the minute, we're focusing on the basic styles, but these are the most commonly used styles in your Tailwind app. So it's just getting used to them and getting comfortable with the syntax. So once we do that, then we will be creating more complex styles, as you have seen on our homepage, but we'll look at that later on. So all I want to do now is we've created an input that is reusable. We want to do the same for a button. So again, a button folder in the components and index.tsx, refce, and then this is a button component. And then this will be a button that we create. And this button will have a type. So we have type submit. So if you hover over it, you can see here, it's submit, reset, or button. So we'll pass that in the props. So let's pass that in here. So type is equal to type. We're not going to worry about the on click. So we'll just leave that for now. And then the class name also. So we'll worry about that later on. And then we also want the text within the button, so we'll pass that in here. Now you could create a separate types file for this. So like, let's do this now to handle the types. So it is types.ts, and we're going to do export type of the button props, and there will be the type equal to the union type that we have. So button submit reset, like so. And then also we would have the text, which is going to be a string. So let's close that off. We're not worrying about functionality in this build. So all we now need to do is pass this in here. So now all we need to do is style the button. So let's go ahead and add styles. But in order to add the styles, we just need to render it out in our login form. So let's do that. And this button is going to be of type submit. And then the text is going to be sign in. So now let's save that and check the styles out. So at the minute, it's a clean style. So Tailwind starts from a completely blank style. So now we just need to add our UI styles in. So that is this sign in red over here. So let's go ahead and implement that. So it's going to be flex, a width of full. So it takes up its container's width. Justify of center, rounded of medium. And now you can see the IntelliSense is coming in and it's helping a lot. This is going to have a background, so BG red of 600, a PX, so padding on the x-axis of 3, and then we can do PY of 1.5, text of small, which means the font small. We're going to give it a font of semi-bold, leading of 6, and then the text is going to be white with a small shadow. So now you can see the power of Tailwind because all of these are their individual classes. So for example, this shadow is this massive class here, and I personally wouldn't remember it, so I'll just pass it in the class that it already has. So that's quite handy. And now we want the hover style. So hover, and the background color is going to change when we hover. So BG red of 500. And this needs to be a colon here. So now if we save, you can see that button is complete. So now we can reuse the import and the button across the site. But more importantly, we have the form complete itself.